Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation on realism. Before talking about in literature, I want to give some information about how realism movement has begun in the first place. During my presentation, you will see a lot of paintings from realistic art for your visual pleasure. Let's begin. Like idealism, realism is one of the oldest philosophies in Western culture. Realism derived from a Greek word, res, which means real. Realism says the world is real and material if we summarize the word. Realist movement began as a reaction to Romanticism and history painting. To show real-life conditions and illustrate them, realist painters used common laborers and ordinary people in their paintings and as inspiration. The pioneers of the realism were Gustave Courbet, Jean-Francois Millet, Honor Damouet, and Jean-Baptiste Camille Corot. The movement has begun in France in 1840s, around the February Revolution which happened in 1848. Realists rejected Romanticism, which had dominated French literature and art since the early 19th century. Realism revolted against the exotic subject matter and the exaggerated emotionalism of the Romantic movement. Instead, it sought to portray real and typical contemporary people and situations with truth and accuracy, and not avoiding unpleasant or sordid aspects of life. The movement aimed to focus on unidealized subjects and events that were previously rejected in artwork. Realism was led by Gustave Courbet in France. It spread across Europe and was influential for the rest of the country and beyond, but as it became adopted into mainstream of painting, it becomes less common and useful as a term to define artistic style. As we all can guess, realism is not limited with art and paintings. Realism entered literature at almost the same time. Its objective was to destroy what is called fantastic and romantic in literature and art, to insert what is real. Realism attempts to illustrate life without romantic subjectivity and idealization. It focuses on the actualities of life and truthfully treats the commonplace characters of everyday life. The purpose of using realism is to emphasize the reality and morality that is usually relativistic and intrinsic for the people as well as the society. This sort of realism makes the readers face reality as it happens in the world, rather than in the make-believe world of fantasy. The roots of literary realism lie in France, where realist writers published works of realism in novels and in serial form in newspapers. The earliest realist writers include Honoré de Balzac, who infused his writing with complex characters and detailed observations about society, and Gustave Flaubert, who established realist narration as we know it today. Some critics credit the first British novelists like Daniel Defoe and Samuel Richardson as realists because they wrote about issues related to middle class. Once realism took shape, George Eliot published Middlemarch, a study of provincial life in 1871, which is considered the most famous work of literary realism to come from the United Kingdom. The genre developed in parallel with the United Kingdom's new middle class, and authors took the opportunity to echo their interests and concerns. Other well-known British realism authors include George Gissing, Arnold Bennett, and George Moore. The history part of realism is over. Now I will talk about the types of realism and characteristics of realism. There are six types of different realism in literature: magical, which includes fantasy; social, kitchen sink; socialist, naturalist; and psychological realism. Now I will talk about some characteristics of realist literature. Realist literature emphasis on psychological, optimistic tone, details, pragmatic, practical, slow-moving plot. It's rounded, dynamic characters who serve purpose in plot. Its empirically verifiable world as it created in novel impinges upon characters. Characters dictate plot, ending usually open. Plots equals to circumstances. Time marches inevitably on. Small things build up. Climax is not a crisis, but just one more unimportant fact. Representative people doing representative things. Emphasis on morality, usually intrinsic, relativistic between people and society. Humans are in control of their own destiny and are superior to their circumstances. Before ending my presentation, I want to make two realist book recommendations. The first one is Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. The second one is Paper Towns by John Green. Thanks for listening. I hope you all enjoyed. Take care of yourself. Stay home.